Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if you please, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's Rizzle, y'all. Welcome to the horror show. So very stoked to have you here for the Saturday weekly worship on the 7th day. And yes, talking all things El Rey. And yes, over 230 episodes now, creeping to that big 250. Very stoked. But as you can see, King is my personal favorite author. Went on a lengthy 7+ year journey, reading all of his stuff in published order. And since then, as books reach their respective anniversaries, golden anniversaries, like a 5 or a 10-year increment is typically how that goes, and that's how they do it on the Simon & Schuster website too. So that's where, you know, I do derive some of that just direction, I guess. And this year we are celebrating the 15-year anniversary of the Colorado Kid. So this was basically where Sai King was, I'm assuming, granted by his normal publisher the ability to just help a company start like a brand new imprint in hard case crime. So they were trying to do like those mid-century like pulpy gumshoe noir kind of gumshoe noir kind of stuff, man. And you know, as opposed to writing like a little byline or a preface, introduction, whatever, which is what the one of the main code dudes who started it all out, he's a dude from New York. The heck is your name? Charles Ardai. So Charles Ardai was one of the guys who started this imprint, but he didn't just get an intro or a preface or anything like that, or, you know, just like an endorsement, which is all that he pitched when he initially contacted King, and then heard back from Chuck Verrill, his longtime agent and I believe editor too, if I'm not mistaken. But he was like, yo, King wants to give you like an actual full story. And so this is like, it's around 150, 160 pages if you don't count the afterword, the introductions, all this different stuff. But it's one that I hadn't revisited in a number of years, and I remembered enjoying it, but thinking it wasn't necessarily anything special. But yet, a lot of the time when I revisit these, and this not being a horror novel at all, yes, it does surround a mysterious body that is found, the aforementioned title character, the Colorado Kid, who was found dead on a shore by a couple of kids who were jogging early one morning after deciding to take the later ferry to school, and or the earlier ferry. Anyway, bottom line, it's a mystery in the fact that the entirety of it is trying to unravel, you know, what exactly do you inevitably conclude when you don't have enough answers for a story to make sense. It's all about, besides just being a very like inside baseball main sort of story, like this is one of King's most main stories as far as like the small island mentality and the secrets that they keep, and, you know, the people from away, and, you know, the people who come there and live in the summer, and the mentality and the outlook that, you know, the year-round peeps have about them, sort of thing. So it's very much a main story and a commentary on that, but it really is both about the process of basically putting news stories together, you know, the news report versus the feature. He's got a really great afterword that I have a little bit that I'm going to read at one particular point. But and then it's also just about what do we conclude, as I said, when something can't be rationally entirely explained, and I've got some theories about that here too. But so yes, originally published October 4th, 2005. Cool thing was, a couple years later, PS Publishing put together a deluxe 4-part hardcover collection. I know Glenn Chadbourne did one, a couple other artists I'm not as familiar with, Edward Miller and J.K. Potter. So, and there's also an additional standalone, if I'm not mistaken. So those are tough to track down, and they are pricey, and so I have yet to add them to my collection of all the Deluxe King, despite all the love that I give to Cemetery Dance, PS and Subterranean, as much as I dig them as well, and some of the Grant stuff. And you may see a new Grant edition that I have up there that was a gift from Lady Catherine. But yeah, those hardcovers are tough to track down, man. And for the unbeknownst, King did actually return to Hardcase Crime with a book that in some ways I'd like better because it's a little longer and more fleshed out and it's a coming of age story. But I mean, this book is still very fascinating in the process of news reporting and expanding on stories and everything. So I have, as all too often goes down, I have a newfound appreciation for this one, and despite being drastically different than Joyland, which he put out in I think June of 2013, if I remember correctly. Yes. This one, I think more people are probably familiar with it because it was very loosely adapted into Haven for Sci-Fi Channel, which I never watched. And much like the Dead Zone, I plan to check those out for upcoming episodes of the show, similar to what I did with Under the Dome, where it's almost like, you know how I did the films that forgot the face of their father series? I've heard a lot of people accuse both the Dead Zone adaptation with, what's his face from Breakfast Club, Anthony Michael Hall, I believe, and he's in the Halloween Kills that's coming out next year. Now, it's next year, unfortunately. But, and then also Haven with just the very loose adaptation and the changing up of characters significantly and kind of veering away from the story of the Colorado Kid, the mysterious body itself. And so I'm eventually going to sometime next month, because that's the anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, of the first season ending. I'm going to check out the first season of Haven. If we don't get the views and if I really don't like it, I may not forge forward. But then again, I did all those other movies, so what the hell, right? So, yes, that show, 5 seasons, technically 6 if you want to be really, really specific about it, 78 episodes. If you guys like that show and would recommend it, please let me know in the comments below. But this is just, it's a very warm story, despite the fact that it surrounds, just this inexplicable mystery of who this guy was. And so the story starts out with these two older dudes. You've got a younger, plumper 65-year-old named David Bowie, which just makes me laugh. And then there's the other gentleman, oh boy, what the heck, Vince Teague. And then you've also got Steffi, who is this 22-year-old intern from Ohio University. And so the three of them are having palaver with this guy from the Boston Globe, who has been doing this ongoing series for them of features about unexplained mysteries of New England. And so basically he's there chowing down on some of the lobster rolls and just trying to dig these older dudes for information, because Teague is 90 years old and he's been basically working in the industry with the Weekly Islander, I think it was called, yeah, which is the paper that he basically transformed post 48 and turned into something significant. And he's been working with David Bowie for the longest time, all these decades and stuff. And so after dude takes off, they start talking about stuff that was unexplained that's gone down in their particular island community of Moose Point, or Point, I don't know. Moose Lookit, Derps, Fuego. But yes, a small island town in Maine that's close enough to the mainland to actually be able to see it on a lot of great days. But Steffi is impressed and just so reverent and respectful of these two older guys who have been at it for so long. She's trying to break into the field. She's wondering if she's going to be kept on after said internship ends. And she just talks so fondly of the community. And, whereas the two older guys are like, they're very much like old kind of, dare I say, geezerly, kind of good old boys from Maine. Yeah? And whereas, she had trouble understanding most of the people's accents in the community initially, but in time, as she got that dialect, I guess you would describe it as, that vernacular, that just, I guess, regional form of speech, so to speak, she was completely enamored and endeared by this community, doesn't want to leave. She talks about just the beauty of, days, just like looking off into the water and just various stuff. But her outlook is contrasted very interestingly with the very keep our secrets guarded from the people from away, as I mentioned earlier, of the two older dudes. And so after dude from Boston Globe is like, nah, peacing out, thanks for having me for the lunch, guys, and he drops a hundo on the table. It turns initially into a debate about whether they give that fat of a tip to the slightly older woman who is a single mother of 3 who is just slaving away in this particular establishment. A place I would love to eat at. Goddamn, I've never had a proper main role in Maine. I still plan on a secondary pilgrimage to go out there and just completely document it here. But so after Globe guy leaves, they go back to their office, and the discussion about unsolved things continues. And there's just various stuff and inexplicable lights in the sky in like the 50s. There's also a poisoning that went on at a church picnic. Suppositions about some infidelity being tied into all these people that died, that drank this iced coffee. And so that's where the guys are like, as they talk with Steffi further about this, they're like, well, there's certain stuff that was never completely explained, but yet we have enough clues where we don't even need to write additional pieces in our publication about it, because of the fact that the community feels like there's enough of a paper trail, there's enough, just length of breadcrumbs that you can kind of just be not absolutely certain, but you have a pretty generally good idea, and there's some things that you just don't need that sort of validation about anyway, because just common sense in a lot of ways, and those proverbial clues, as I mentioned, they give you enough of a direction towards the answer. But that's when they start going into this story about the Colorado kid who was found on the shore of the Moose Lookout in 1980. April 24th, 1980, yeah, that's right. And so, it unravels for that less than 200-page count, as I mentioned, and yet it's interesting how each clue, like each bit of information that they basically relate to her, she's really on point, and she's asking things, that are kind of, it's almost like opening a door into a room with a series of other doors, It's like the Russian doll thing where there's just more inside, more inside, more inside, more inside. And it's fascinating the way they're basically just relating everything to her in the fact of, yeah, these two kids are jogging, they find dead dude out there, and it's just very, in some ways, coincidental things, people going against protocol, like this younger guy who was, working on his graduate stuff, and he was with these law enforcement officers from the mainland who come to investigate. They tell kid not to look in the evidence bag of the personal possessions who were on this guy, who, found dead in just a shirt and pants, chunk of meat in his mouth, like some nice, like filet mignon or something, and yet no identification. He's only got a couple things on him, like a Russian coin and, a pack of cigarettes with only one that had been smoked, and yet the mystery continues to unravel. It's like, you get questions answered, but then those answers in turn lead to more questions. Like there was somebody who had claimed to see the guy earlier on the day before, he was discovered dead on the beach, and they were like, yeah, he was wearing a jacket, and they're like, well, where was his jacket when the body was found? Because it wasn't there. That's one of the things Steffi, the younger intern girl, picks up on, and it just goes from getting more information, finding out the guy has a name, and they even start calling him the Colorado Kid because that pack of cigarettes that he had on him had a stamp from Colorado on it. So that's where, and this became like a passion project of sorts for these guys, because the law enforcement was like, well, it looks like, he died from like a brain hemorrhage, from choking on this meat, and we can't figure out who the hell he is. Case closed, let's just eventually bury him and be done with it. But it was the call many years, 16 months later, if I remember correctly, from the younger guy who was just working briefly with those older good old boy law enforcement types, who helped by contacting our said guys of Vince and David Bowie, and basically getting them hot on the trail once again with the Colorado revelation. then in turn when you find out that he's from Colorado because of the stamp on the cigarettes, that's where they're like, well, let's just cast the line over into Colorado and, you know, run this story with a photo of him. And there is kind of a, like, as close as King comes to horror in this is a few of the discussions about the embalming process and this dude actually being buried. But it's not like his typical gruesome discussion of even the appearance of the corpse, aside from where they're peering and trying to see what's like stuck in as a lump in his throat. But yeah, I mean, they trail it to Colorado, as I said, and it's Netherland, if I remember correctly, the exact place, which is just past Boulder. And so yeah, King actually having set some of his stuff in Colorado before, i.e. The Shining, and you know, big parts of The Stand, important ones and things. And so yeah, I would imagine he still has an affinity for that particular state, and hence the connection aspect, because you know he could have really, you know, put dude anywhere, but yeah, he probably still has a fondness and affinity. And so then they track down the wife, and yet this is where since I wasn't trying to be super spoilery, it's just very interesting the way the plot progresses, and we have this very inquisitive young girl and this endearing dynamic that she has with these two aging guys of 65 and 90 respectively that she looks up to so much. And oh boy, what other stuff? So yeah, inevitably we do get, and we figure out who this guy is, but you know, aspects of how he got there are what is inexplicable. And you know, whenever you get rid of the impossible, there's okay. So where was this line that I wanted to read? Okay, page 56, paragraph 6. Okay. All right, so this is Vince talking, and he says, oh yeah, the story of the Colorado Kid is a confusing tale, all right, which is why it wouldn't do for the Boston Globe, don't you know? Too many unknowns to begin with, not a single must have been for another. He leaned forward, fixing her with his clear blue Yankee gaze. You want to be a newswoman, don't you? You know I do. Well then, I'm going to tell you a secret almost every newsman and woman who's been at this, who's been at it a while knows. In real life, the number of actual stories, those with beginnings, middles, and ends, are slim and none. But if you can give your readers just one unknown thing, two at the very outside, and then kick in what David Bowie there calls a must have been, your reader will tell himself a story. Amazing, ain't it? And so that's where, with the other stories that I mentioned, you know, like the poisoned, you know, picnic and all that different stuff, there were at least, there were some unknowns, but if you have at least a must have been or two, that's where you're like, okay, we kind of see where this leads. And that's what's fascinating about the contrast between those sort of stories and this Colorado Kid business, as you really find out the extent of how homie could have gone, the extent of, it was like what, like 2,000 miles in 5 hours to be in Denver where he was last seen, and then shows up in Bangor, and he's, you know, why was he there? Was he running from someone, from, you know, to like a certain situation perhaps? That's where and King, he gives clues, but he doesn't necessarily give answers, and especially with this being a mystery story, and with this not being like sort of a really gruesome tale, I would imagine a lot of fans of King's like the much more macabre horror stuff, they won't dig on this, but I really felt the progression of so much was really fascinating as I'm just continuing to look at the notes. You know, another interesting passage I want to read is from page 151, at least in this illustrated edition, and it's the first paragraph, and this is where we're getting near the back half of the story, but I don't recall it being something specifically. Okay, here we go. 151. Okay, so this is Vince once again talking, the older guy, the 90-year-old guy, the dude who founded this publication that Steffi works at, and he's like, but when you get rid of the impossible, whatever's left, there's your pup scratching at the door to be let in. And so that's really, but when you can't get rid of the impossible, when you're trying to figure out how this dude could have suddenly and in such a short period of time appear, and they theorize a lot of stuff. They're like, well, private jets and, you know, rental cars and all this different stuff, all circumstantially lined up in an interesting fashion. But, I mean, really for me, there's madness in it somewhere, as Steffi says at one particular point, and I think that's totally true. And if I'm at least gonna give some theories to other sorts of stories here, we don't know if man was murdered or whatever, and I'm not gonna say one way or the other what my theory is. The guys in the book definitely give it, but I definitely think that his means of getting to where he did, especially with the fact that there is a mention of him going to a Starbucks coffee and it's like 1980. There were no Starbucks coffees in Denver in 1980. So what level of the tower is this, I mean, did he pull like abroad again? Was he on the run from some low men or something? Was this kind of like Mrs. Todd's Shortcut or, Father Callahan sort of situation where he stepped into another version of our America? That's my theory. I don't know, but, whether there is any sort of supernatural essence here or not, and I know that the show, I've heard some people that was their detriment about it because they didn't necessarily perceive anything supernatural in this story, but if you're a tower junkie, that's where you see close to these different things and these sort of possibilities. Other random notes, I guess maybe that's a little too spoilery, but the infernal revenue service, you can tell, because these guys even say at the beginning of the story about the woman at the restaurant pulling tips and all this other stuff, what Uncle Sam doesn't know can't hurt him and so on. So I thought that was interesting because, the King, if I'm not mistaken, has had some issues with, I don't know if it was the Infernal Revenue Service, the IRS, but I know there was some controversy at one point, if I recall, about just his state taxes or whatever, but hey man, that's really nothing for me to scrutinize or speculate about. I am here for the author, and this surprisingly very rewarding and enjoyable book that I had kind of forgotten about the solidness of this one in the many years since I initially read it. And King has a interesting little, okay, so this doesn't spoil the narrative at all. But this is like a final statement that you get really declarative from the 90-year-old dude from Vince, and just his purist mentality, I guess, is a good way of going about it. But final paragraph 176. So this is what he basically just like. It's not so much a tirade, but he's definitely very much making his opinion known, and I really dig this part because it is also at the core and duality of the story and some of the points and observations that King is basically making about the art of feature writing versus news writing. So let's return to Vince. There are thousands of papers and tens of thousands of people writing stories for him, but there are only two types of stories. There are news stories, which usually aren't stories at all, but only accounts of unfolding events. Things like that don't have to be stories. People pick up a newspaper to read about the blood and the tears, the way they slow down to look at a wreck on the highway, and then they move on. But what do they find inside of their newspaper? And Stephanie says feature stories. Thinking of Hanratty and his unexplained mysteries, the guy from the Globe that I mentioned. Oh yeah? And those are stories. Every one of them has a beginning, a middle, and an end. That makes them happy news, Steffi. Always happy news. Even if the story is about a church secretary who probably killed half the congregation at the church picnic because her lover jilted her, that is happy news. And why? I don't know, she says. You better, Dave said, emerging from the bathroom and still wiping his hands on a paper towel. You better know if you want to be in this business and understand what it is you're doing. And she says, feature stories are happy stories because they're over. And Vince says, that's right. They have resolution. They have closure. But do things have a beginning, a middle, and an end in real life, Stephanie? What does your experience tell you? When it comes to newspaper work, I don't have much. Just the campus pin, so on and so forth. Your heart and mind, what do they tell you? And she says that life usually doesn't work that way. She was thinking of a certain young man who would have to be dealt with if she decided to stay here beyond her 4 months, and that dealing might be messy, probably would be messy. So yeah, she's got a little flame. Rick would not take the news well, because in Rick's mind, that wasn't how the story was supposed to go. And so this is where it's like, people all too often, when they think they know where the story is going, and it doesn't go there, or it doesn't go where they want it to go at least. There is that essence of disappointment, lack of gratification, and the little discourse there goes a little bit further, but it's just really incredibly fascinating to me, some of the commentary that King gives here about, that's my background originally, was in print journalism before segueing into the video work and things like that. And so just his picking apart of the process and injecting his own personal politics into just those observations and stuff like that, something that King does incredibly well here in The Colorado Kid. And those were aspects that I had legit forgotten since the previous time that I read this. And just to give you guys a nice little glimpse to the afterword here, the first paragraph, 186, I love his forewords, his afterwords, when he's just giving explanation about the process and how he came to even telling this story in the first place, and just some of the insight and some of his own viewpoints that he was trying to just inject into all of this. This is really good right here. He says, "I don't want to belabor the point, but before I leave you, I ask you to consider the fact that we live in a web of mystery and have simply gotten so used to the fact that we have crossed out the word and replaced it with one we like better, that one being reality. Where do we come from? Where were we before we were here? Don't know. Where are we going? Don't know. A lot of churches have what they assure us are the answers, but most of us have a sneaking suspicion all that might be a con job laid down to fill the collection plates. In the meantime, we're in a kind of compulsory dodgeball game as we free fall from wherever to ain't got a clue. Sometimes bombs go off and sometimes the planes land okay, and sometimes the blood tests come back clean, and sometimes the biopsies come back positive. Most times the bad telephone call doesn't come in the middle of the night, but sometimes it does. And either way, we know we're going to drive pedal to the metal into the mystery eventually. So I just very much the idea that people just need spoon-fed answers as opposed to challenging storytelling that gives hints here and there and yet doesn't give you that sort of resolution. There's a lot of filmmakers who are really like that, and there's people like, for better or for worse, whether you thought it was just bloated, pretentious crap or whatever, Tenet was definitely one of those films, just like even something else that Nolan did, like Memento, or even just these nondescript narratives like We Are the Void. These are stories that challenge us to actually think and analyze, and in a lot of instances, rewatch, reread, whatever they may be. And I got so much more out of this than the previous time that I just kind of breezed through it very quickly. Once again, I read this in just a couple hours today with just its actual length and whatnot. And then I also listened later on in the day at slight bit sped up as I was driving around, but listened to the narration for the audiobook. And shout out to Andrew Thompson, my dude on the Hail Cotet. He's a big fan of the audiobooks. But Jeffrey DeMunn does a fantastic job as the narrator. He captures the voices of these old, kind of grizzly Maine guys very, very well. Jeffrey Munn, if you're not familiar, he's a protege in a lot of Stephen King adaptations with, our good dude, Mr. Darabont, Frankie there. So he was in The Mist, he was in, I think he was briefly in Shawshank. I know he was also in Green Mile. People will also know him as the Sheriff in the Blob, and I think he was in The Hitcher, if I remember. But, for me, The Walking Dead, the other Darabont bit, he was Dale, and I loved Dale. Dale was a terrific character, so he does a kick-ass job narrating the Audible, or if you want to jump over to Scribd, which is $8.99 a month, and I believe the entire King collection is streaming there for your monthly fee. So if you want to listen to The Colorado Kid or any other terrific King selections, I'm pretty sure that his entire bibliography is still streaming over there. So I extend a grande gracias to everybody who's tuning in, giving this a big look. And yes, this did not make a live book of the month sort of thing, because the next 2 months are big time heavy hitters. October 3rd, live here on the Horror Show, we do our, so the first Saturday of every month is when we do our book of the month. So September book of the month, first Saturday of October, is when we do our live discussion about it, and it's none other than Firestarter, that sees its 40-year anniversary. My goodness, that's just crazy to think about. And then in October, the book of the month, I'm just going to announce it now. I've given hints, is Salem's Lot, which is seeing its 45th anniversary this October. My God. But yeah, so those are the next 2 books of the month. So next Saturday, once again, October 3rd, 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. That's where we will be live here on The Horror Show for that palaver and discussion. So with those 2 heavy hitters, this had to be just a regular video. But I hope if you're not familiar with the Colorado Kid or the other hard case crime, Joyland, and it's very befitting because March 2nd, he's putting out his 3rd hard case crime, which is called Later. We have that to look forward to. The aforementioned Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, if you feel like having some additional palaver beyond just these videos. We're creeping closer to almost 1,000 people on there, but terrific palaver. Gotta give a shout out to my dude Jacob Buddy Douse, who celebrated a birthday earlier today, like 9 hours ahead of me in the UK. So much love to him, the guy that I've had awesome Captain Palaver with, and so shout out to him here on the 25th of September. Tomorrow is actually Cecil Laird's birthday. How about them apples, y'all? And my brother's. And I had mine like a week ago. So yeah, September is wrought with lots of birthdays. We also just had Kings. So yes, jump over, become a part of the Facebook group if you are inclined. Tower Junkies, constant readers, or noobs, whatever it may be. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find Wall on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Here on YouTube, I do also have a significantly smaller personal channel called Infuegotainment if you want to see some of my thoughts about non-spooktacular stuff. Yeah, so a like, a share, and subscribe here, and if you're inclined to check stuff out over there, it is significantly appreciated. So once more, I have been Fuego, y'all have been Rad Status, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos, and constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you for the palaver here. I'm hoping that we share more of it sooner rather than later, and until that instance occurs, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King, baby. If you've never checked this one out, it is a very intriguing, brisk little read.